just to reiterate, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be learning how to get started and up and running quickly with a Ruby on Rails app with GraphQL. So as already stated, my name is Ceci Correa. I'm a lead instructor here at Shopify for our Dev Degree program. Dev Degree is actually a work study program that we offer here at Shopify for university students. It's kind of a cool program. We get university students, they come, we actually train them on our stack. And then after they learn everything about our stack, they get to go on different placements throughout Shopify. So by the time that they graduate, they already have about like 3-4 years experience working at a major company. So that's what I do day in and day out here at Shopify. Been at Shopify for about a year and a half. Previous to working at Dev Degree, I was actually a backend developer at Shopify on our app extensibility team, mostly building APIs and developer tooling. So that's me. And as I said before, I'm here to talk to you about how to work with Ruby on Rails and GraphQL. So today, what we're going to be talking about is a little bit about REST, just a little refresher, and how it is different from GraphQL. And then I'm going to walk you through how to get started with Rails quickly. So we're going to go from the ground up with Rails. After that, we're going to talk about how to install GraphQL onto a Rails application. And then we'll actually get started writing some types and queries on GraphQL. And then lastly, we're going to use the graphical interface to actually see those queries and see the data that we get back from GraphQL. So a lot to cover. Let's get started. So the first things first is what is REST? Now, this might be a little bit basic, but I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So many of you are probably familiar already with REST APIs. Maybe some of you have worked on REST APIs or consumed some of them in the past. But just as a little refresher, this is a bit of a sample REST API interaction from a client to a backend. I got this example from howtographql.com if any of you are interested in learning more after this workshop. And so this example kind of shows just a typical REST API interaction. In this case, we have a client, maybe that's a desktop or mobile, and trying to get some data on a user. So here we can see that we're making 3 different API calls. The first one is to get user, and we pass in an ID. We get some data back from the user. Then we also make another call to posts, and we pass in that ID as well. So that's user ID / posts. We get some data, and then we make a third request, users ID / followers, and then we get the follower data for that user. So it's just kind of like an example where if you are trying to get multiple data from a specific user, you might end up having to make several API calls. How is GraphQL different than that interaction? So in GraphQL, first of all, you're not making GET requests or anything like that. Everything in GraphQL is actually a post request to a GraphQL endpoint. And so how we actually pass in the data that we are requesting is through that body of the post request. And in that body, we put in what's called a query. And you can see here in this slide at the top, you can see how we are building that query. So we are passing in, we're saying users, and we're passing in an ID. And then we are specifically requesting only the fields that we care about. So you can see here in this slide, I have to look away to my bigger screen so that I can actually see the names of what we are requesting. So we're requesting name, post. From the post, we're specifically requesting the title. And then from the followers, we're specifically requesting, I believe, the name as well. And then we're also passing in a little delimiter. So we're saying limit 3. And then what you see at the bottom is that the data that we're getting back from GraphQL. And one thing that I want to call out here is that we are only requesting very specific data. So if we go back one slide to our REST API data, you can see that we're getting a lot of data that we might not necessarily need. So here I believe there's like birthday and other stuff like that. And as you can see on the GraphQL example, we're only requesting for a name. So you can see that we are just requesting the data that we need, and that's all that we get back. And I think that's really helpful. I think that also helps us on the front end. We're just working with the data that we actually need. It's a little bit easier to parse that on the front end of things. So what are some of the benefits of working with GraphQL? As I mentioned, you can only get the data that you need, which is already covered, but also GraphQL is statically typed. So you don't have to worry too much about things like type checking. And also because it is statically typed, there's a lot of tooling out there that will take all of those types and just sort of like spit out documentation. And so a lot of that documentation is built in with one caveat that I will cover in a minute. And another great benefit is that deprecation is sort of built in to the language, and it'll actually appear in your documentation right as you deprecate fields. Hopefully this will make sense once we get into the demo. So what I want to do now is actually show you an example GraphQL API right now with the Pokemon API. So let me go ahead and share my tab. We shall see. Okay, so you should see this Pokemon API website if anybody is interested in working with an open source RESTful Pokemon API. This is it. And here, this is just, they've been a REST API for a long time. I'm just going to change this here to, let's say, we want some Jigglypuff data. And you can see it's fairly fast. And one thing that I did want to point out is that they actually have a GraphQL beta right now. So I actually want to play around with it with you all real quick. And so when I mentioned that documentation is like a sort of like a first-class citizen, here, this is one of the things that I mean is that through because we have this like schema that GraphQL provides, we're able to work with it and use this specific tool, which is called Graphql. It's not a typo; it's GraphIQL, not GraphQL, and it's pronounced Graphql. And this is an interface that allows us to explore the API interactively. So as you can see here, we have an explorer, and I can see all of the different like endpoints that I have. I can also explore it here. You can see documentation explorer. I can search the schema if I want, so I can just start typing. Kind of sucks that everything in this schema starts with Pokemon because it kind of makes it a little hard to search. But I can also just click around and you can see and you can start exploring all of the different calls and queries that are available to you here. So I think if I just search for um, Pokemon, I think, and I scroll down, 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 down. Here we go. Pokemon version 2 Pokemon. And so now I can see like, okay, so this is a call I can make. So one great thing about this graphical interface is that it will actually also sort of like autocomplete for me. So it can do stuff like that. So if I just start typing and then it'll try to autocomplete and try to guess what it is that I want. So here I want Pokemon V2 Pokemon. And then let's see here, I can click here on the type itself, and then it's going to tell me all of the different data points, I guess, that I have access to. So here I can see height, name, a bunch of other stores or other things. So I can just say here name. And let's just go ahead and run that query, and you can see already, like, I got all of that data back. And so this is a really great way for people to explore your API. Now, the caveat is that you may not, this is not something that is just like built in. This is something that you would have to add on to your implementation. And not everybody wants to make this available for just any third-party developer to just go and play around with the API, understandably so. And so that is the caveat that I did want to mention, is that you can choose to do it this way. But even if you choose not to make this interface available publicly for third-party developers, you can use it internally at your company for first-party developers to explore your API. And I think this is actually really helpful, especially at larger companies where you might be consuming an API that another team works on. It can really help keep teams in sync in that way. So I'll give you a minute to just kind of sync and absorb all that data. And now with that little demo, I actually want to move into more of a hands-on demo time. So now, instead of just sharing a window, I'm going to share my entire screen, and it's going to be a little bit big. I'm just gonna go ahead and warn you. So hopefully you can all still see. And so here I'm sharing. This is a brand new Rails app that I just created. Haven't really done anything to it. And I have my terminal right here. Hopefully you can read it. I can maybe try to make this a little bit bigger. Uh, and maybe try to make this a little bit bigger as well. So hopefully you all can see it. And so, yeah, this is a brand new Rails application that I just started. I haven't done anything to it. And the reason why I wanted to start from a fresh application is because I want you to see how simple it can be to just add GraphQL. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this gem file. If you're not too familiar with Ruby or Ruby on Rails, a gem file is sort of the equivalent of like a package.json, or say maybe like a requirements.txt in Python. And so here I'm just going to go ahead and add GraphQL, and I'm also going to add Graphql so that we can then explore all of the different queries that we're going to write. And I'm going to say bundle, and this is going to actually install GraphQL in my Rails application. And now all I have to do in order to actually get started with some GraphQL goodness is run this query. It's I don't know if y'all can see it, but it is Rails generate GraphQL install. I'll just scroll up a little bit so that you can see it. And you can see that it actually created all of these different types of files. Let's actually explore what it just created. So it created this folder called GraphQL, and inside I have a bunch of base types that I can work with. So it just handled all of that for me. It created a base mutation. A mutation is essentially like sort of like a query that has side effects, and so this is what you would do to create things or update data. And then it also created a query type, and this is where we're going to end up writing most of our code. And so the next thing that I want to do is actually start trying to fill this in. So right now, I don't have anything, I don't have a database in this Rails application. And I just want to show you how easy it is to get started with that. So I can just go ahead and say, Rails db create, and it's going to create a database for me, just using SQLite, which is the default. And then what I want to do now, I'm going to refresh this so that y'all can see better, hopefully. I want to create a model of data that I can start working with. And so what I'm going to do here is use one of the handy dandy generators that Rails makes available for us. And I'm going to create a cat model. So let's just pretend that we're building maybe an app for like a cat rescue organization, and we need to keep track of our cats. So I'm just going to go ahead and try to create something that could be useful for that. So I'm going to say Rails generate model cat. And we know that cats will have a name, which is a string. And then I guess maybe we would want to know their intake date, which is of type date. And then we want to know if they have been adopted or not, and that will be a Boolean value. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter, and this actually creates a migration for me. And so this is actually going to create a table called cats according to the specifications. And so now I can just say Rails DB migrate, and you can see create cats has been migrated. And so now if I look at my schema file here in Rails, you can see that there is a table called cats, and then a row called name, which is a string, intake date, adopted, everything that I just specified, Rails has already taken care of. I did cheat a little bit before this and created a very quick script to seed my database. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Great. So now we should have some data to start working with. And for all of the generators that Rails makes available, there is one thing that we actually have to do by hand, and that is create a little script to dump our GraphQL schema into something that we can work with. And so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I did want to point this out in case anybody does want to get started working with GraphQL. This is something that you have to do manually. Luckily, it's only 2 lines of code. And so here you have GraphQL, rake task.new, which is a helper that the GraphQL library makes available for you. And then all you have to do is just pass in your schema name. Luckily, this was generated. If I go look under my GraphQL folder that Rails made for me, I'll just go in here. I'll copy paste the name of the schema, which is just the name of your app. Now that I've done this, I'll be able to dump that schema once I start creating it. And so now let's hopefully start to get to the fun part of actually writing some GraphQL. So now I can actually use another really cool Rails generator to create a GraphQL object. So here I already have a model called cat that we just created. You can still see the command here in my command line. And then now if I just say Rails generate GraphQL object cat and hit enter, you can see Rails generated the type for me. So it is, I can see it is under app, GraphQL types, cat type. So if I go under types and I look at cat type, I can see name, intake date, and adopted, which is all of the things that I specified in my schema. And we can look at our schema, and sure enough, it is the same. And so what Rails can do here is that because Rails knows our database schema, when I say create an object cat and I am passing in a model that exists in our application, then Rails can just generate that type for us. And we don't have to write all this stuff ourselves, which I think is super, super neat, very helpful. So now that we have that in place, we can actually start writing some code. But as you can see, it's all very easy and fast to set up. So let's say here, just going to remove this boilerplate. And when we generated when we scaffolded all of this GraphQL stuff, Rails created this query type file, which is where we write all of our query code. And it even created some sample code for us. So I think that's super helpful. And so here, let's say that we want to write an endpoint to get cat data. So I'm just going to call this get cats. Instead of a string, we are going to return an array. So this is how I say, give me an array. And then inside, I'll specify the type of what's going to be in the array. And so this is going to be types cat type, because everything in GraphQL has to be a type. So here I can say I'm going to return types cat type, which is this file that Rails generated for us. I'm going to get rid of null false because I'll just say that it can be null for now just to make things easy for us. And I'm going to pass in a description. And this description is what will be available on the graphical interface once we start playing around with that. So here I can say maybe like get all cats. And so now we can write what's called our resolver. And this is how we are going to sort of resolve that query that we are trying to write. So here we can say get cats. And how we get data from our database in Rails is by using active record, which is the ORM that comes built into Rails. And it is very easy to get the data here. All I have to say is cat.all. And then I can get all of the cats in my database. And so now with all these pieces in place, I can actually go and try to dump my schema. And so I think what I'm going to do is say Rails, I believe it's tasks. And this gives me a list of all of the tasks and all of the generators that Rails has access to. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this one, Rails GraphQL schema dump. And then now I can see, okay, my schema has been dumped. Awesome. I'm actually going to open another terminal here just so that I can start the server on another window so I don't have to start and stop it. So we're just going to go here and I think it's GraphQL demo. And then I should be able to just say Rails server, and this will start my server. And it starts it on localhost 3000. So let's go ahead and open that, but open it on the right browser. Here we go. I have my localhost 3000 slash graphical. And this is the interface that we saw when we were playing around with the Pokemon API. And as you can see here, I will get rid of that and I can click on query and I can see already, ooh, get cats. This is the query we just wrote. It returns a cat, an array of cat. And when I click on that, I can see this is the description that we wrote as well in our code. It returns a type cat and I can see all the fields here that are available. So now let's go ahead and actually write that query. So once again, I can start using my autocomplete. So I can say, start typing G. I see the autocomplete, get cats. And then let's say we want name. Let's just say name for now, just to drive the point across that if I just want one piece of data to get returned, that's what I'll get. So here now you can see I'm getting all the cats and just the name. And this is all fake generated data that I used a generator for. So that's kind of where that is coming from. So it's fairly simple to get started with that. And then now let's just add one more thing. Maybe we want some filtering. So I can say, we'll do this, it's a little bit differently. We pass in an argument and then we'll say available only. And this is going to be a Boolean and we'll say that it's not required. And then now we can add this to our function, available only, and we'll say that will default to false. And then we'll say if available only, then we will filter where adopted is false for cats that haven't been adopted, and else we'll just get all of them. And I'm going to go ahead and save this, dump my schema again. I'm going to go here to my graphical. Do have to restart the graphical interface, but now when I go here, I can see get cats already has this updated, and you can see this parameter that we just added. So now I can go in here. Autocomplete is my friend. And now I can say available only true. And then just to sort of like show that it is working, we'll get that adopted value, and we can see that we are now only getting cats that have not been adopted. And then one last thing that I want to cover here is deprecation, because I did mention that deprecation is sort of built in. So what I can do if I want to deprecate a field is say deprecation reason. That's all I have to do to deprecate a field is just provide a reason. So maybe let's just pretend that we have moved to get cats new. Let's just say that. We'll pretend that there's a new endpoint called get cat new, cats new. And let's go ahead and dump the schema again. I'm going to refresh this, and now it's very faint, but you can see there was a little yellow line that appeared once I refreshed my schema. And when I hover over, you can see the deprecation note right there. And it even will tell me move to get cats new, which is just the deprecation reason that I provided in the code itself. And so this is kind of what I mean, that deprecation is built in, and it's really helpful because, again, if you're maybe collaborating with other developers within a large company, then you can sort of communicate these things within the code itself. And I think that's super helpful. And that is, in a nutshell, how to get started with GraphQL in Rails. We went very quickly. It took about maybe 20 minutes from practically a brand new Rails project to a project where we added GraphQL, we added some models, we added some data, and we are making queries that are returning that data. And so I think it can be a very, very powerful combination there. And so now let's get back to our presentation. So that was our demo. And so just to recap what we have covered today, we have learned how to work with Rails and GraphQL together. Some of the benefits that I see here is that it's very fast to go from 0 to working API. And this is because Rails handles a lot of that heavy lifting for you. And so all of these generators will write all of this boilerplate, so you don't have to worry about writing boring boilerplate stuff, and you can focus more on writing your features and writing all that fun stuff. And if you want to learn more about GraphQL, we have an excellent 3-part series in our Shopify engineering blog, actually written by one of my colleagues at DevDegree. And this is a 3-part series that is Understanding GraphQL for Beginners. And it is a 3-part tutorial that is excellent. If you want to learn more about working with GraphQL, I would highly recommend you check that out. I think if you just Google Shopify GraphQL for Beginners, you should be able to find that. If not, I will try to follow up with that link. And with all that said, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. And yeah, if there are any questions, I would love to answer them to the best of my ability.
Thank you so much. This is more of, I encourage everyone to ask questions. I'm also from Shopify. Hi, I'm Day. So if you do have any questions, definitely ask. And if you have any questions that are around like talent or anything like that, feel free to ask that now. I can help answer those sorts of questions. If you're wondering how to get in touch with our talent team, I've put in a Google form into the chat. So feel free to jump in there. I believe a few of you have done so already, and share your information with us, and we can reach out and get in touch. Shannon says, no questions, but that was great. Thank you, Ceci. And thank you. Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much.